Finally, it happened to me. I'm unemployed.
Hey guys, this is Tom Monda. Welcome to Unemployed, and my new YouTube series. This time we have one of my favorite guitarists, Mr. Pete McCann. I'm so honored to have him on and chat about music with him. He's an incredible musician that I've been listening to for a long, long time. I remember I got a very skewed idea of what guitar players sound like in New Jersey because growing up, I heard you with Mahavishnu Project, I heard Vic Juris, and I heard Bumblefoot, and I'm like, man, is everybody like this good in New Jersey? Like, what's going on here? Why do I even bother?
That's funny.
But talk a little bit about where you came from for those not familiar with you. Give me the quick and dirty about Pete McCann.
Well, I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is a small town, about 60,000 people. It's the closest big city is Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it's about a 90-minute drive from where I grew up. And I grew up on a farm that was sort of deactivated. So we had a barn and several outbuildings and about 45 acres of property to roam around with and go tobogganing on in the wintertime in Wisconsin. And we had some motorbikes and hiking and dogs and typical kind of like farm life without any pressure of have to actually do any farming.
That's a good deal.
So as a result, I had an older brother, older sister, and a younger brother, and my grandfather. We all lived in the same house, 6 of us, my mom and dad. So space was at a premium, and everyone had their thing. Like my older brother was into basketball. My sister was into music. She played flute. My mom sang in a church choir. She played a little bit of piano. So I was kind of searching for my thing.
Yeah.
And my dad took me to see Roy Clark and Buck Owens play at the Chippewa Valley State Fair,
Nice.
which is about 20 minutes from my house. And that was one of the things that got me going and thinking, like, I really want to play guitar, after watching these guys on TV on EA. And
did you start in that country bluegrass sort of world, or was that just the catalyst?
Not really. That was kind of like a catalyst, but I just started taking lessons when I was 8 years old at the local music store, and that was Morgan Music. It still exists. It's a great store in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And the local guitar teacher at the time, he didn't want to teach me because I didn't have any piano experience, and he was like, he's pretty young.
What a dick.
Yeah. So I think my mom bribed him like an extra 50 or something, and his part of his requirement was that she would sit in on the lesson, make sure I practice, and my mom could sing, so she sang along with the exercises in Mel Bay Book 1. Cool. And I think that's really important, like when you're starting out, like to have some parental involvement, because otherwise they're just like, okay, Junior, go. I'm trying to watch TV or do something, So I think, I owe my mom and my dad a lot. They drove me to lessons for all those years, and it's really cool. I did start kind of early. Most kids start when they're 10 or so. So I was kind of fortunate. Yeah. And one thing leads to another, and by the time I got into junior high school, I finally got a teacher who started kicking my ass. He was going to the local university there, and he was playing in the jazz ensemble. And the first thing he did was correct all the mistakes I was doing when I was playing Mel Bay Book One. Like, no, you're not keeping the time. You're playing wrong pitches. You know, you got to read each clef. It's, you know, all these things, and you know, accidentals. He just, like, after the first lesson, I was just completely busted. I think it was like crying when I saw my mom. You know, she's like, no, you should stick with this guy. He's gonna, you know, open up the door. And then after he got me going, he started me on music theory. So I was in the 7th grade and learning music theory. And then he started teaching me the blues scale, improvisation, A minor pentatonics, and, you know, just the usual.
Yeah. And
you know,
did you have an awareness of jazz at that point, or was it just sort of something in the periphery that existed?
Well, it was in the periphery. I mean, I knew it existed and I heard it. And then he said, well, why don't you come down and hear the jazz ensemble play at the university? And my mom was nice enough to say, sure, let's go down there and do that. So I went to go see him play with the university ensemble. And I was like, man, this is great. And then as the summer was coming up after that school year ended, he said, you should go to this jazz camp up in Shell Lake. You'd really dig it. And Shell Lake is about, I don't know, hour and a half away from our house. And it's very inexpensive as far as jazz camps go, like when you compare it to Abersol or some of these other camps. So, you know, I was able to talk them into having me go for a week, and they drove me up there, dropped me off. And it was kind of like a watershed moment where you're immersed in the music, you know, for 6 days in a row. And then you play a concert on Saturday morning for the parents. And then you go home and you have the rest of the summer to shed. So I did that for 6 years in a row until I was out of high school. And it was great. Because there's not many, you know, I didn't know at the time, like I was just starting out, and I was going to a small Catholic high school, and there's not many kids into the jazz. And, you know, it's just one of those things, like I was grateful to have that music camp to look forward to every summer. And
sure. And you must have been like coexisting, you know, with the rock stuff as well, because that seems like such a huge part of your playing. Like, you know, for those who aren't familiar with Pete's playing, like I took a buddy of mine to see him at the 55 bar for the release of your last record. And, you know, I like to expose people who aren't like avid jazz listeners to new music. Like, hey, come with me to the show, check it out. And he was expecting jazz in the sort of this is relaxing sense. And the first thing he said after the set was like, man, that guy is ferocious. And I think that's a great adjective to describe the way you play, because you do have that ferocity of rock. So was that something that, like, were you playing in rock bands around there at the same time you were doing the jazz thing, or was that something that sort of came earlier in your playing? Because it just seems like such an integral part of your sound. It's not like when you kick on the distortion, you're not a jazz guy with distortion. You play like a rock guy, you know?
No, I definitely was listening to rock music since day one. And my older brother, he had all the great records. You know, we were listening to Pink Floyd and Kansas and Aerosmith, Three Dog Night, Bachman Turner Overdrive. And he had a really nice stereo that he invested in. And we would just lay on the floor and listen to these rock records. So I was immersed in that sound since day one. And the jazz thing kind of came along, you know, and kind of took me in another direction. But I never forgot that sound. And, you know, all those great guitar players. So Eagles, he was really into the Eagles, still is. And then, you know, Top 40 radio, K-Rock radio came on in the 80s, right when I was in high school. So you could hear any rock band you wanted on that particular radio station, that format. So
so you never felt any pressure throughout your career to sort of like, for lack of a word, just be more purely jazz? Was that something that ever was a concern?
I'm still trying to think about that, because I always thought, like, well, maybe if I just concentrated on one thing, it would have been easier to do a career. But I always thought, like, why limit yourself? You know, music is Pandora's box. Once it's open, you can't close it up. And once you hear something and you hear a particular sound, and why should you shy away from it? So that's kind of me with distortion pedals. It's just something I love to do, and it's part of the history of electric guitar. You know, imagine Jimi Hendrix without distortion. You know, it's just it wouldn't be the same thing.
It's a very sad timeline where Hendrix exists without distortion.
Imagine
Yeah,
Charlie Christian without an amplifier. I mean, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. You're absolutely right. So that that gives you a little background about Pete, where he's coming from. Now, tell us about the newest record you have out. I've gotten a lot of people onto this record. We listen to it a lot on the road too. It's something that we spun all the time. The tunes are fantastic. The writing's amazing, and obviously the playing is great. Like, what can you tell us about that record? What makes it different to stand out in your discography of records? Like, what do you think is the thing that makes this record unique?
Well, like all of my records, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of different elements of jazz. There's some straight ahead, there's some avant-garde, there's some jazz rock fusion, and on this last record, I have more of like a Metheny tune. You know, like really soaring melody, and I'm strumming acoustic guitar in the background. So I don't do that on every single record, but I don't know. Lately, I've just been trying to expand the tonal palette. I have a ballad where I play nylon string guitar. It's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
On my last 3 records, I have one tune where I'm at least playing either steel string acoustic or nylon only without electric. So it's kind of like more of the same. It's not really groundbreaking, and I've used the same band for pretty much for the last 4 records. So
yeah,
I think that's some new guys.
I know. You know what? I think that's to an advantage because you don't see that too often nowadays. It's always this rotating kind of cast of characters, and I think the fact that you guys play together a lot is very apparent. When I saw the band live, you guys have like that thing where you could tell you guys are flying by the seat of your pants, but everybody knows.
Right.
You know what? Everybody knows where to go because you guys have such glue from playing together so much, and that's not something that you hear very often. You know, because not everybody has the luxury of sort of developing a band and developing a sound, and and you guys certainly have that. Yeah.
I always think like the greatest jazz bands in history were Miles Davis Quintet and the John Coltrane Quartet. And when you think about the personnel from the 60s, very little change. I mean, Train had Jimmy Garrison for a long time, and he had Elvin Jones an incredibly long time, and then McCoy Tyner too. So that it's one of the most cohesive quartets. So I always try to pattern a group after guys I just want to continually keep playing with, and they're kind of open-minded like I am. They play rock and roll, they play jazz rock fusion. They're not afraid to play with pedals. They're not afraid to expand the sound. Like my keyboard player, Henry Hay, he has a great band called Fork, which, Adam Rogers played in the first version of that. And now Chris McQueen from Snarky Puppy plays in that band. And Henry's like a master of ancient keyboard sounds. And he for the last record, my car was like bogged down in the back from all of his keyboard. We had we had so many, and plus a accordion. He played accordion too, so that was like the first time I've had accordion on my record. And he played a legitimate clavinet. This thing's like 120 pounds. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's a great record. What's the best place for people to support you directly? Apart from obviously streaming, where I know you make the big fractions of a penny like I do, but what's the best way to support you directly, Pete?
I have to tell you, just as an aside, I got a check today for 1 cent.
Oh, hell yeah.
It cracks me up. It cracks me up when the postage is more than the check.
I know. I have one from Music Reports that I saved just like that. I think it might have been, not to one up you, but it might have been 6 cents. But
whoa!
That just means lunch is on me, if you know. But,
that's about one ramen noodle.
One ramen noodle, yeah, for the both of us.
No, I'm on every platform. I'm on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora. When I put my last record up on CD Baby, it's just like check all box. So all 140 platforms that exist in humanity, you can stream it. And then if you're really have nothing to do, it's all up on my website too. So you can stream the early records completely, and then the new ones you can just like check out a minute worth of each track, and maybe you want to buy it. It's also up on YouTube and wherever,
You do the Bandcamp thing, Pete?
I I'm not sure. I guess so. I think that's like a thing a lot of people are trying to promote now
Yeah,
because they're actually
yeah,
giving proceeds back to
exactly. Yeah.
musicians.
I keep telling everybody, I mean, it's the only platform I've seen out of all these platforms that wouldn't be able to exist without artists. It's the only platform I've seen actually going out of their way to do a little something, a
Right.
small gesture to artists. So I always tell
Right.
people, that's the place to go. But how has like the industry changed, like, because you've existed over sort of the big flux of the industry. How has it affected your life as a performing musician?
That's a great question because before you could make money doing a lot of different things, and I used to do that a lot. I mean, I used to do recording, I used to do gigs, I used to do teaching, and then you would actually make money on album sales, and they'd send you a check every quarter or every half a year or something, and then the streaming service just kind of just laid to waste all the profit you could ever make from that.
Yeah.
And I understand that's technology, and movies are the same way. For $12 you can see 1,000 movies every month. It's just crazy, but
Yeah.
that's unfortunately that's the day and age we live in. So as a result, I'm sure you know about this too. Most musicians just took it on the road, and you have a better chance of selling a CD or an LP direct marketing. Like if somebody hears you, they take the CD home as a memento from the concert.
Yeah.
Same thing with like a T-shirt or whatever, a hat or something. It's like, yeah, I was there. I saw this band. It's just kind of cool. So I think you sell more records directly to people if they hear you play live.
Totally.
And unfortunately, the COVID is just it's destroyed it. It's
I know.
destroyed it.
And the one thing we had left, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh.
Yeah, you're not the only one to say that. I was talking to Henry yesterday, and he was like, "Yeah, it's not like the music business was so great to begin with,
Yeah.
and then streaming service kind of came and kicked us all in the nuts, and
Yeah.
now COVID is like just destroyed everything, especially live performance."
Yeah. So as a musician with a family, how has this COVID thing, like, how have you been existing? How do you keep it going? How do you find inspiration? How do you survive?
I'm very lucky. My wife is still gainfully employed. She's a art teacher for the state of New Jersey, and where she works. She has two different schools where she's teaching elementary level, and they want her. They just gave her a raise, so we're very happy because without that, I'd be scuffling. I don't know what I'd be doing. And my kids are home from college, and they're actually doing very well. They're using my car, and they're doing DoorDash and Shipped. My son does Shipped, where he goes to Target and he picks up stuff and drops it off. So between the two of them, they're making way more money than I am right now.
Showing you up.
So as a result, I'm like here. I'm just practicing, writing some tunes. I'm doing some lessons over FaceTime or Zoom, and I put in my lessons.com page. I'm trying to build up some students because
Cool.
I don't really know what else you can do right now. I've done a few studio projects remotely from some friends of mine who live in Germany, and they usually live in New York, but Germany is giving money to musicians right now, which would never happen here.
Never, yeah.
But
that's not a rarity in Europe, by the way. There's like lots of countries that will subsidize musicians' incomes if you're playing X amount of times a week. It's
exactly.
It's crazy.
and Sweden and Norway are notorious for subsidies, and they actually will fund a tour. So last time I was trying to build a tour in Europe, they're like, "Yeah, it's not going to happen, man. We got these bands coming in from Sweden. We don't even have to pay them." It's crazy.
You can't compete with that.
I know.
No matter how hard you try.
Yeah, we'll come and play at your venue. You don't have to pay us. You don't have to put us up in some skank hotel. We got the government behind us. And it's a really amazing thing.
I was just over in Europe right before this whole thing hit. I was on tour, and we were a week and a half from being caught in the Netherlands because they closed the borders a week and a half after we had played a festival there.
Wow.
So if fate would have like turned the other way, we would have been stuck in the Netherlands with nothing to do. Which, as you know, It doesn't
That's
sound
not, that's not a
it's
bad
not
place
the
to
worst
be.
place. Not the worst place. But, I lead a 7-piece band. We have one crew guy we take with us. So feeding all those mouths and finding a place to stay is kind of a scary prospect with already, what little money
That
making.
would have been that would have been a cramped hotel room.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh
So,
man, my deodorant ran out. What are we gonna do?
so Pete, how do you think this is like moving forward? What do you think are the changes that we're going to see in the music world as professional musicians? What's your perspective on this whole thing?
Man, we're in uncharted territory, and
That's the scary part. It's totally unheralded.
yeah,
There's really
yeah,
no
yeah.
time in history that we can ever use as a frame of reference for this kind of thing.
And the problem I see is I see a bunch of tremendous videos on Instagram and Facebook, and they sound really great. Everyone's investing in technology, getting good mics.
Mm-hmm.
But how the hell are you going to make any money doing this? I mean, unless you have a loyal fan base who wants to keep contributing, just because they're nice people. But it's the same sort of thing. Like, are you going to go to the Museum of Modern Art through your computer and then make a donation? I don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think most musicians are trying to either write a book, keep writing music for future projects. I've been lucky just to kind of do a hodgepodge of stuff to keep busy.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I wish I had a good answer for you, but I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I see friends of mine in other states that have opened up and they're actually doing outdoor concerts, but people are sitting in the lawn and they're not wearing a mask. So, and even the guys up on stage, they're not wearing a mask. I'm like, well, it's just a recipe for more illness.
And we see it happening with the spikes.
Oh yeah.
It's
yeah, of course.
I mean, I had a gig, Pete, last weekend. It was a masked gig, me and a singer, and she wore a mask and I wore a mask, and there weren't a lot of people there. It was outside, but everybody was masked, and I was pleasantly surprised, because so people are turning it into they're making it like a encroachment of their personal freedom kind of issue, when it's really not that. You're protecting people from the externality of maybe affecting their lives, and I don't see that as an encroachment on freedom, and it's kind of like, man, it's so short-sighted and kind of selfish, when you see this stuff. It's just
the best example is when you look at Taiwan. I was there. I actually played there a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is with your group you played there, Pete?
No, I was playing there with some very good jazz singers, and we went there to play a Christmas concert. And even when I was there, that was maybe December of 2017, 2018. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't get over how everyone was wearing a mask all the time. And I asked somebody, and they're like, well, yeah, there's a lot of pollution. There's a lot of motorbikes and mopeds. And he's right. There's like crazy amount of mopeds, so that the little tiny mufflers emit a lot of toxins. So a lot of people were wearing masks already. So when the COVID finally hit Taiwan, everyone was already wearing a mask. And they're used to it. It's part of the culture.
Business as usual.
Yeah. So sadly in America, it's all about bravado. It's like, instead of listening to science and listening to health officials, we're like, screw it. We're Americans. We're tough.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit.
The expert opinion doesn't matter anymore. It's
yeah,
something
exactly.
that I'm realizing going on social media,
And sadly, our president, not my president, he's ground zero for affecting how people view this whole thing. And if he doesn't wear a mask, then why should I wear a mask? And that's basically the people who went to his rally. That's their mentality. And I'm sorry to say, quite a few people just don't care. And like you say, it's, even if you didn't care about yourself, it would be good if you cared about somebody else for a change.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
And that's basically, even before COVID, I saw this happening, like, especially after he got elected, just basic humanity among people. It's so strange now. Like, I'm walking down the street, nobody wants to say hi. They're just looking at their phones. They're kind of self-involved with blinders on. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad, when I grew up, it wasn't like that. People said hi to each other. They asked how you were doing. We sat around the dinner table and talked about what happened during the day. And that's something I try to do with our family. Like, at least we get together at the dinner table and talk it out. If somebody has a problem, what better time to do it?
Yeah, it's definitely a microcosm of a much larger problem that we've been seeing for sure.
Right.
And it only takes having a Facebook account or something like that to really see. I mean, I've seen more arguments than probably my internet career combined in the past, 3 or 4 months. That it's like it makes your head spin after a while.
Exactly.
And like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but no huge issues have ever really been solved on social media. So, it's not, I feel like arguing is just sort of, it's a fruitless exercise kind of.
Yeah, it's basically opinion book. There's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
factual basis. It's like, well, I heard so-and-so, or you repost something that might not even be factually accurate, but if you see it on Facebook, you're like, oh, there must be some truth to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's crazy.
Exactly. So like, speaking of the state of music, I don't know if you've been following stuff with Spotify. I found this interesting. I'm always pondering kind of where things are going to go because it's important to sort of think ahead, especially when things are so uncertain. You got to think even more ahead. I'm seeing Spotify do a lot of stuff, mostly with podcasts, but I think it's only a matter of time before music, where they're buying exclusive content, exclusive digital rights, right? And I feel like this is sort of Spotify making a chess move to kind of usurp the whole label concept. So would this be something as an art? Because I could see this being beneficial on a smaller scale. Like let's say, like imagine a jazz artist that yourself is on a label, and that label has all their content on their own specific streaming service, like you would a Netflix or anything else, and people could subscribe to that. That way, the profit split is way less, and people could sort of like support a whole group of artists that they care about that mean a lot to them, more directly than something like Spotify. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the direction that all this stuff is going in?
Yeah, I think it's there's no better time for a large corporation to make a move to swallow up independent artists and kind of screw them out of publication rights or publicity or publishing in general. And it's sad, it's like we're making so little money doing this, and now it's like, well, we're just going to take the final blow of the sledgehammer and bang your head back into the board. So I don't know. It's a good time for musicians to become self-aware about publishing and performance rights organizations. Don't ever put out a record without belonging to at least ASCAP or BMI or I belong to CSAC. If you're Canadian, you can belong to SOCAN. So you have to kind of protect yourself a little bit, and it doesn't cost anything. It's not in the long run. It's going to save you some money.
The publishing thing, man. The publishing thing. I always tell my students that are putting out original music, don't ever give up your publishing rights. It's really the only thing that you have to sort of make money in perpetuity, and not like large amounts of money, but like any musician, you're grabbing crumbs to make a whole piece of bread. That's like the story of your life, And
what did you do with your Thank You Scientist band? Did you make a conglomerate for all the guys in the band, or are you in charge of publishing, or how's it work?
I'm in charge of it, but basically we split everything down the middle. I think it's the only right way to do it. If you performed on the record and you're touring with us, you get an equal portion of the music, regardless if someone else wrote all of it. Because I mean, my whole belief is that like the guys that are out on the road, putting in the time, away from their families, all this stuff, not making great money, like that money should go to them, and it should be equal, because we're all part of the fight. It's not gonna go in any direction. We're members of ASCAP, and we are on a record label, but luckily we negotiated our contract in a way that we still own our master rights, we own our publishing, all these things. It's more of like a licensing sort of deal than anything. And
that's great.
The idea of signing to a record label now is something that I can't even really fathom a reason why now. There are small things like brick and mortar distribution, right, which is hard to do on your own. Right. But the brick and mortar store, it's like I feel like I've been to every last record store in the continental United States from touring. I know where I feel like I know where they all are, and that's scary because there's not that many of them,
Not many of them left, at least.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, whatever. It's a long babble to answer your question. But you know, it's stuff we have to think about. And I know at least like I have a music degree. The idea of publishing or sync or master use license, any of those things, that wasn't mentioned once in any class I had. And I feel like that is so valuable because, you know, even though it seems like crumbs, it does add up over time to something. And
Right.
and that little bit could be the difference in paying rent or not paying rent. So, you know, I tell everybody take that very seriously and really we had a meeting with a lawyer who just like we paid him for his time and he broke down everything about sync and master use license and I remember it immediately paid off because we had licensed like 25 tunes to a video game. And if I didn't understand how sync versus master use license worked, I would have gotten paid half of what we were entitled to.
Wow.
And you know, I wouldn't even have batted an eye. I would have said thank you, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just, you know, they're murky waters for a reason, you know, because it's not, these rules aren't invented by the musicians. They're invented by people in suits who like to make money off the musicians, you know. So the murkier the better, you know.
Exactly.
So what
Yeah.
like oh go on, Pete, before I change the topic here. What were you gonna say?
No, I was going to say this last record I put out, it was on my own label. I just finally had enough with trying to make a jazz record label happy because I've never been able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, made a name and I didn't license it or anything. But, my wife made a little logo for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't know. It's just small steps. So,
Yeah, totally.
but all the money I've made from the record, when people buy the record, goes directly to me.
Yeah,
I
you can't
mean,
do that.
iTunes and CD Baby take a little bit off the top, but and also if you buy directly from my website, they take a small percentage. Like if it's $14, which includes a physical CD and the mailing, I might get like 12.85 or something like that. So it's pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
if they're only taking $1 off just to have me hosted on their website or whatever, it's fine. So,
Yeah.
I mean, iTunes is that's like gouge central.
Oh yeah.
If they're gonna buy a record for $10, you might get six something, like 640 or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Crazy.
It's kind of sad, but
It is sad, and that's like, you know, a symptom of a larger problem. Like if you follow you know, this mentality that sort of, it's kind of like everybody shoves this kind of stuff under the umbrella of like, oh, you're a musician, you have to pay your dues. You know what I mean? So, and that sort of has become, oh, you got to expect to be screwed. You know, like Live Nation, for instance. Could you imagine another industry that would make an announcement like that? We're saddling artists with the burden because of this, even though we can't exist without the artists.
Right.
And also, we're making it so that we own all the video rights to anything you perform in our venue, so we could put them online and monetize them. I mean, like, there is no other industry in the world that would allow that kind of thing to happen. Yet in music, there was enough people to not even bat an eye. You know, whoever does their PR for Live Nation looked at that and went, "Yeah, this sounds good. That's fine." You know.
Well, I think when the streaming services were really coming up, it would have been great if all musicians got together and said, no, we're not going to produce any content for a year unless we sit down with the Congress and work the shit out and make some legislation. But no, everyone just said, well, that's the wave of the future. That's how we're going to get our music into more hands of more people. But people didn't realize on the back end there was no profit margin at all. So it all blew up in our face.
And now
I think Metallica was like one of the few bands to say, no, this is terrible, don't do this.
Yeah.
And, nobody listened.
Oh. So yeah, so to bring it full circle here, Pete, if there was an alternate timeline where you were coming up amidst all this craziness, you were just trying to get your career started, what would you think? What would you do? Would it change your course? Should musicians think about changing their course? How do we deal with this kind of thing? What do you tell your students?
Man, it's so depressing. And I had a long talk with a young former student of mine, and he just graduated from college, and he's like completely bummed right now, and rightly so. At least me, I'm 53. I've had a pretty good career. So if I couldn't play another note of music tomorrow, which might happen, I'm very happy with whatever I was able to accomplish. But for him, it's like, man, he's just trying to get his foot in the door, and now the door is completely closed until God knows when, you know?
Yeah.
It's really such a strange time for any of us to be doing anything. So I don't know. Thank God there's these programs where you can kind of get a little video happening with other musicians who figured out their DAW and know how to record something on their laptop, you know, and kind of sync up the video.
Yeah.
It's funny when I was, like you say, like when you go to music school, you never have any classes on the actual business of music. I never learned anything about computer audio because I graduated in 1989. It was before Pro Tools was even invented.
Yeah.
We were still using ADATs. You know, ADATs was like the big format back then. So, yeah, you know, I grew up in a time where it was pre-computer boom and digitalization of everything. So it's funny, and now we're in this new gray zone that we don't know what's really going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially with education this fall, you know, like kids still might be stuck at home, which is, I'm sure the parents are going crazy. Like, I can't do this anymore. Get this kid out of the house. I can't look at him.
Yeah, I can't imagine having kids right now and like be like, you know, it's such like a crazy thing to think about. You know, if you're two parents working full time and suddenly your kid has no school and they're home, like what options do you have? You know,
Exactly.
it's pretty scary. You know.
I gotta let my cat out. I think she wants to go to the box. Hold on a minute.
Oh, by all means.
This is exciting. Lacey, come here. Come on, keep going. Sorry about that.
No, totally fine, man. So I was gonna ask you, Pete. You've played with a lot of incredible musicians. Any golden nuggets of advice that you got over the years that maybe some other young musicians that are listening to this might find useful? Anything you want to share?
Oh, so much. I've learned so much. I'd love to go back like 20 years ago and just change how I was as a person. And, you know, if you could look at it from the glasses I wear now, as opposed to the glasses I wore back then, because I have, you know, it's like once you have that under your belt and all these experiences, the most important thing is not to get so incredibly frustrated with yourself and your playing, and then make that evident on the bandstand, because people right away know, like, oh, this guy's going through something weird, you know, I don't want to talk to this guy. So I think it's super important to be not as hard on yourself as you can be. You have to take everything like you're learning, you're taking baby steps every day, you know, like it's not the race. You're doing a slow walk through life. You know, it's not racing to the finish. So if I could look back, I would just try not to be so hard on myself and be grateful for every day that you can play music with other people, because look at where we are now.
I know, right?
It's just such a strange time, man, to be a musician.
Yeah, you said it, man.
It's weird.
You said it.
And another thing I would say is in addition to, you know, trying not to get frustrated and upset, just try to be the best musician you can be for whatever situation. And I always try to be ultra prepared for whatever group I'm going to play with. I try to learn the music. If there's some sight reading involved, I try to come prepared and not get hung over the night before if there's something important I have to come and play on. And try to put yourself in situations that you don't feel comfortable in, because that's how you learn the most. And I always wanted to do a lot of studio work, and fortunately I've been able to play on over 100 different jazz records while I've lived here in New York. And I find it's the hardest job to do. It's the hardest job to do well. And it's the most rewarding experience because you have something to show for it at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important, especially now for musicians, to get comfortable with recording at home, since we can't go anywhere else to do it, and learn something about technology. And as long as I'm talking about that,
Sure.
it's also good to start learning the video thing, because how else are we going to be able to communicate with any fans or anything at this point?
Yeah.
So like you're doing a podcast or whatever, or a
Mm-hmm.
video show. It's really important because you want to maintain some sort of fan base, and you want to attract new people. And since the web is just wide open, you never know who you're going to reach. You know, there might be somebody in Malaysia or Russia or wherever, you know, like
Yeah.
somebody sends them a link like, hey, check this out. You know, this is really cool. So
Yeah.
I learn about new guitar players almost every day just by going to that
Mm-hmm.
it's a hashtag on Instagram, jazz guitar or jazz guitarist.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So every day there's like somebody new, like just playing some great blazing stuff. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
wow, man, I better go practice.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing, you know, as much upheaval that the internet has caused, it really does give you the most direct line to people who appreciate a certain type of thing. You know, it's never been easier to find people who all love jazz guitar when it's all under one
Yeah.
hashtag. That aspect of it is great, you know, and I feel like that's been a big help with my career. Just like I play weird music, and finding, you know, being able to you know, hit so many people who like weird music, you know, with one broad stroke is a powerful thing. And it's something that, like, if I didn't have the internet, I don't think I would have the luxury of being able to tour like I do and all these things. So, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, you gotta.
Yeah. Fortunately, the same student that I was just talking about, he's grown up in an era where everything was on your phone. You
Mhm.
know, you don't have to go to any public library like I did to read, you know, to actually check out a record and take it home and listen to it and then bring it back in a week, because it's all right there in the digital world.
Yeah.
And you know, and now these videos that are on YouTube of cats just playing licks, and then you can see it directly underneath their fingers with tablature going by. It's just amazing. Like, man, this takes forever to make something like that happen. So I
Yeah.
don't think people realize just how involved some of these things are. And I think it's taken for granted, like
Yeah.
so many other things.
So, sometimes to like the detriment of the student, because when you see a video bite that's a 30-second video bite, you know, you're sort of experiencing it like it's the spontaneous thing and not experiencing all the work that went into that.
Right.
And it's sort of like, you know, I have like a lot of students that sort of, it sort of bums them out, you know, but like I tell them, it's like, listen, a lot of these things that you see, it's not a glimpse of a moment in time. It's
No,
something that, you
it
know,
was worked on
it was something that was
incredibly
worked
long.
on. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that, like, but you know, and that's the sort of leveling ground that live music can only provide. It's like that's where you're going to really hear the honest, sort of direct from the artist's brain. It's like when you see a live jazz concert, as great as listening to jazz on a record is, to me, nothing compares to seeing it in front of you, because it's almost like you're more part of the process of that musician kind of just opening up their brain and spilling out, you know, their
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
And you,
Exactly.
yeah, you just, like, you know, in the sort of impersonal sort of, you know, kind of social media thing, it's very easy to lose that element. Not to mention the sort of, like, you know, I was talking about this with Bruce Foreman, how we're sort of like, you know, this Pavlovian training of just like, oh, we got to, what else is on? You know, you watch 5 seconds of something, and it, you know, whereas when you're at a concert, you know, you sort of have no choice but to come on the journey, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
certain things that you might not experience as a whole watching a video online, when you're forced to take it all in and follow the artist on whatever path they're taking you down, you know, it just takes you to a different place, you know. And that's really the thing that scares me the most, is that experience might not be around anymore, or like there might be people who don't experience that feeling, you know.
Yeah, you know, we're all hoping that the cure, the antidote comes along pretty soon, because if
Yeah.
enough people get vaccinated, maybe we can get back to regular. But even then, people are going to, by then, maybe next year, people are talking about it. But it's still going to take a lot to convince somebody to come out of their house, especially older folks. I mean, maybe not younger people as much because they're gung ho and think they can conquer life and they're young and healthy and they don't need to worry about it. But yeah, I mean, it's weird. I was starting to think about all the huge summer festivals that are just canceled. Nothing like where you could play for thousands of people. What are you going to do? Stand them 6 feet apart from each other? It's just, I think it'll only come back when the vaccine is around and enough people have it and the testing gets better and people believe in the science. You know, it's crazy. But you know, all we have for now is technology. Thank God we have a way to communicate.
Exactly.
You know?
And you know, selfishly though, I am enjoying a lot of the video content. I know you have like a chordal improv series that you've been doing on Facebook, which is great. I love that. And any guitar player, even if you're not a jazz guitar player, I definitely recommend following Pete and checking out what he's doing because he's really doing some amazing stuff. And
people always ask me like, well, man, did you write this stuff down? I'm like, no, this is improvisation. And if you don't believe me, I have it all saved on my computer. You can come over and look. Just wear a mask when you come over. But I tried to. I could actually talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, please.
I'll sit down with my Strat or my 335, and after I warm up a little bit, I just start playing some chords. And then one day I was like, man, I'm so tired of seeing these dudes play as fast as possible. Let me just try to come from improvisation from a different perspective, just harmony only, and maybe very little melody. Of course, you're going to have a melody, whatever the top note of the chord is, that's kind of usually going to be your melody. So, and I'm very influenced by Holdsworth's solo guitar pieces, which are all chords and very little notes connecting the melody. So I was just like, man, let me just try to do something like that. And I would sit down and at first I would just have the computer going on QuickTime. Like I just turn on a QuickTime, make a new movie, and I have the USB microphone ready. So that way I don't need to wear headphones and I can hear what the sound is from the amplifier. And I would just do like a few at a time and then stop and start so it's not one long continuous thing. And then you know, gradually I would get a few that I would like and then save them and listen to them, see if they're good enough. And then if I have a good day where I'm doing that, I might make like 6 or 7 and then go back and just take the one that sounds the best out of it.
Yeah.
Because like any other improvisation, there's going to be notes that don't sound like they belong there. So I try to pick the one that doesn't sound the most inadequate. Like, you know, so whatever chords go together the best on that particular day, that's what I try to post.
Sure.
And I'm just trying to post like one a week. That's enough.
Yeah. Are you doing it on Instagram too, or just Facebook?
Yeah, I put them on Instagram and then I link it to Facebook, so they're both there at the same time. That's kind of a nice feature.
Yeah. Is that like when you do those improvisations? Is that sort of like, are you taking like concepts you might be working on, like personally on your own and try to kind of manifest them in improvisation, or is it just totally kind of like even playing field, whatever sort of comes out kind of scenario?
Well, I remember listening to Chick Corea in this, it was either an interview or something that I read, and he said there's very little that any musician truly improvises. It's all stuff we've already played through in our head several times before. So especially in the chord improvisation, I've played these chords many, many times in big bands or small groups or solo pieces. So they're chords that I'm familiar with, or chords that I stole from the Holdsworth book, you know, reaching for the uncommon chord. That's like my chord Bible, you know?
Yeah, of course.
And then, you know, if you're a guitar player, you always ask another guitar player, like, yeah, what is that chord? You know, like, so there's been decades of that too. Like you have friends and you're just like, man, show me that chord. You know, I don't understand what's going on there. So, you know, we're all in this community where we're learning from each other. And so the chord improv is just something I like to do. And, you know, you can go back and write it out later.
Sure.
Make it even better.
I'm going to ask you one final question here, Pete. So I don't play to like a jazz centric audience. My music is jazz influenced, but it's definitely not jazz. And for a lot of people who might be trying to get into jazz, it's kind of daunting because there's just so much and it's kind of hard to know where to start. So if you were talking to one of those fans, what were like maybe 3 albums that you say like would be really gateway albums that you could highly recommend that someone who's maybe not like a jazz aficionado can open up and get into?
Well, I think that the greatest selling jazz records of all time are pretty straight ahead, like Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, Dave Brubeck, Time Out. I love Nancy Wilson's record with Cannonball Adderley. Like that's some beautiful music, and the improvisation is not totally insane. So I don't know. I think it's good to start with a singer sometimes because people appreciate a story of the song. So yeah, any great jazz singer with some instrumentalist playing a solo, that's a great place to start. And of course, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. It's like a snapshot in history. It's like the great changing of soloing. Like it was all about, making these impossibly hard chord changes into something that's more even, and you have maybe 8 bars to play over some changes before the next chord comes along. So I think it's cool. The whole modal development scene in jazz music, it was like a new branch. It was a new path to follow. So if people don't know anything about jazz, that's a great record to start with.
Cool.
Man, any Jim Hall record.
Any
His
Jim Hall
sound
record
is so relaxing. It's just
Yeah.
I love to listen to it.
I think my favorite Jim Hall might be the trio record where he has the Canadian rhythm section. He has like Ed Vickers rhythm section on it. You know that one?
Terry Clark. Don Thompson.
Don Thompson. Yeah, it's got he does like
Terry
just some
Clark
beautiful
is playing
shit.
with a broken wrist. He's playing the drums with a broken wrist. And
I didn't
the back
know
of
that.
the album, he has a big white cast on.
Oh, that's too funny, man. That's too funny.
Yeah, that's some beautiful music, man. Jim was an amazing player. What a terrific sound.
Just some of that's like a lesson in comping. Like if you listen to that record, man, that one, and obviously the one with Bill Evans, the Undercurrent. Right. I mean, that's just a master class in accompanying as a guitar player and not stepping on any toes, but still playing beautiful stuff,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you were first starting out listening to jazz and somebody said, well, here's this John Coltrane record called Ascension. Start with this. You would just be like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. But if you had some background as to where did John Coltrane come from and what music did he start to play initially, and how did he get to this advanced like sonic development? Yeah, you're right. It's important to like start slow. Don't get into the avant-garde mid 60s, crushing hard bop just yet. Take baby steps and try to listen to something. Yeah. That's not gonna scare the hell out of you.
All good advice, Pete.
Same thing with jazz rock fusion. If you just start with Mahavishnu Project, you're gonna be scared. You're gonna be like, what's going on here? Sure. I need something a little bit before that to make me not so scared of it.
That might have been the first fusion record I heard was probably Intermounting Flame. Even though I had heard Zappa and stuff like that, which sort of some of his stuff straddles that line. But I think when I heard Intermounting Flame, that was a game changer for me.
Oh yeah.
And then from that continuum, I found the usual sort of Guitar Suspects and kind of then like branched out from there. And other stuff too. Like that was my gateway to Miles Davis. I'm like, oh, this guy played with Miles Davis. Cool. Let me dip into this. So that's I think a certain rock, musician that could be a good gateway record depending on who you're recommending.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you're more interested in the electric side of jazz, Weather Report, just about every record is so listenable, and not scary, and all the melodies are singable.
Yeah, and also the sounds that Zawinul uses are so like timeless. Like it really does not sound of the era at all. You really can't like quantify it as something from. Is this from the 70s? Is this from like? It's just so like Black Market. I was listening to the other day, and I mean, talk about the compositions on that album.
So good.
So good, man. So good. Like just like doesn't get enough credit, Heavy Weather is always the album that people tell me to go to, or when I was a kid, like, oh, get Heavy Weather. And I sort of neglected some of the other Weather Report albums. And oh my God, I Sing the Body Electric. There's so much great stuff in there. So much great stuff.
And even after Jocko stopped playing the band, they still made great records like Domino Theory. Man, I love that record. It's really good.
Yeah, what was that? There's a live record that's really good. 7:30 or 8:30 or something like that. It's got
8:30.
Yeah. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. That was really something.
Yeah, that's Jocko and Peter Erskine. Man, that's some great stuff.
Crazy.
That's a rhythm section right there.
Yeah, you said it. Pete, man, thank you so much for hopping on with me and chatting, man. I had a great time. It's always great to hear from you, and yeah,
it's my pleasure, Tom. And I just want to tell your listeners, if they don't have the new Thank You Scientist record, they need to check it out. It's so good.
Thank you.
It's heavy. There's so much in there. It's really good, and the sound quality is amazing.
Thank you, Pete. That means a lot coming from you, man. Everybody check out all the Pete shit. It's great. It's all great. And it's all streaming. Amazing guitar player. You can check him out. What's your website, Pete?
PeteMcCann.com.
PeteMcCann.com. I knew it wasn't something too cryptic.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
I got in the game when it was early on.
Hell yeah. Snag that URL. Good, man. Well, it was a pleasure, man. Stay safe. I hope you and your family keep on keeping on through all this, and I hope I can see you play live sometime soon, man.
Likewise, Tom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Take care.
Have a good evening.